it's Sasha, and today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 favorite books of 2021 plus some honorable mentions. I literally live my life for these videos and these lists. I absolutely love gushing about my favorites. This is my second time doing a favorites video, and I literally I love it so much. I find it so fun, and just reflecting on the year I had and the books I read, it's such an incredible experience. So I have so many books to talk about today. I have 10 top favorites, and this is honestly so difficult to narrow down. It was insane, but I did end up doing that, so that's cool. But before I get to those, I want to talk about some honorable mentions, some books that I just really loved, but they didn't quite make that top 10 list. So without further ado, let's just get in, because I feel like I'm going to be gushing and it's going to be a long time. So this is in no particular order. I just really love these books. These are just the ones that didn't make it into the top 10. So I'm going to start with the Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. I loved this book so much. It was so good. It was about this young girl, and there was a blood ceremony, and her blood ran a different color than what it was supposed to. And instead of being tortured, exiled, killed, she was approached to join a king's army of women, essentially, that were just like her. Pitter patter, heart beating. I loved this book. I found it to be a lot more gruesome and gory than I was expecting, which I love in stories. I love gore in stories. I do. I love horror, gory, bloody. I love it. It's so good when it's humans. If it's animals, it's a different story. But I absolutely adored this one. Moving on, I want to talk about Sick Kids in Love by Hannah Moskowitz. This book was so freaking cute. It was about these two kids, and it wasn't with the stereotypical cancer or anything like that. These were just two kids that one of them had rheumatoid arthritis, and the other one had another thing, but I don't remember what it was. And this book was awesome. It had two Jewish protagonists. We had a lot of sexuality discussions. Our main male character was bisexual. He had a lots of not cis straight people in his family, and it was just a really great story. I found the writing to be so engaging. I really felt for these kids. It was such a healthy discussion about having a disability, but having one that isn't so blatantly obvious. You wouldn't think of a teenager with rheumatoid arthritis, because that's not something you would tend to associate with a teenager. But this teenager was incredible, and she was going through all these things, and her friends would kind of just they would do their best, but they struggled because it's not a visible illness. So it was hard for them to see it, other than when her joints really swelled up. But oh my God, it was so good. The discussions that were had were so important. Some of the scenes were so stinking cute, and I just genuinely had an amazing, amazing time reading it. I highly recommend it to anybody. Literally anybody. It was so good. Next, I want to talk about The Start of Me and You by Emery Lord. This was my first 5-star read, I think, potentially in 2021. This was so good. This is about a young girl whose boyfriend had died in a tragic drowning accident, and she spent a lot of time just kind of trying to get out of that. And she meets this really cute, really nerdy gentleman, and I absolutely love it. It's so good. This was just such a cute story. The friendships were also so good in here. The friendships between male and female characters, top tier. I really loved it. I really highly recommend this to anybody who's a fan of young adult contemporary. This is definitely, it does touch on some harder topics, dealing with grief and death at a very young age, but she was good. She was so good. I loved her so much with my whole heart. I love this book. The series can literally leave, but this one book can stay forever. Next, I want to talk about In a Holidays by Christina Lauren. This was a very polarized book when it came out. A lot of people were expecting great things from it and really just didn't love it. I read it this holiday season and loved it. It was so good to me. To me, it was really good. It's about this girl who's kind of stuck in a rut about her life, and the one thing that kind of keeps her going is that her family always goes to this cottage of the family friend for the holiday season. And there's a cute guy, and it's in a cottage setting, and it's just so cute. And I love the Groundhog Day loop. I always love that in stories. I'm not a big movie person with it, but in stories, I always find it interesting how the author chooses to craft that particular way. And their romance was so cute. The relationship was so cute. I loved it so much. I have read 2 Christina Laurens this year. They were both 5 stars. So Christina Lauren, literally one of my favorite author duos, clearly. I'm obsessed. Obsessed. And In a Holidays was so cute, and I loved it. So I don't care. It got a lot of polarizing, got a lot of hate. That's fine. People just don't appreciate actual talent and actual art, and that's okay. Next, I had to bring my reread of The Hunger Games into this because holy frig, this was so good. I read this a decade ago now, which is really gross to think about, actually. me. But rereading this year, oh, she was so good. I loved it. It took me right back to where I wanted to be with Katniss, with Peeta, with freaking Gale. No, he was not it. I love this. Susan Collins did an amazing job at creating this world, and this whole series really just like blew me away. But the first book, like, it took me back. I think I loved it more this time around than I did the first time, which is unsurprising, to be honest, but I loved this. I loved this so much, and I'm so happy to be back in this world, and I just really needed this. So I loved rereading this series. Another honorable mention is The Land of Stories by Chris Colfer. There's just like a bunch of books in the series. There's like 6, and I read all of them this year. They're at my mom's house, or else I'd hold one of them up. But oh my god, it's such a good series. It's a middle grade like fantasy. What happened after the fairy tale stories had like ended. All these fairy tale characters are grown up, like Red Riding Hood, Cinderella, all these people. And it was just so suspenseful and so fun, and I just really loved the series. I read the first 3 or 4 back when I was in middle school, but bringing it back and reading it all now as an adult, I loved it. So I had to bring it in. I feel like all of them were like 5 stars, and I feel like that's because mostly I wasn't really rating when I read them. I just kind of was like reading to get back into that nostalgia of it. I wasn't really reading for rating and all that stuff, but oh my god, it was so good. I love the series. So I highly recommend it if you're looking for something different, I guess, or a little bit younger with some mature themes still in there, because there are some mature themes that they discuss. They discuss grief and death, and they discuss lots of things, but I can't think of anything else. But yeah, I highly recommend it. It's really good. Next, I want to talk about How to Make a Wish by Ashley Herring Blake. This book, oh, it ripped my soul out and threw it across the room and was like, go get it, bitch. Like, I was this book's bitch. This is about a sapphic love story that takes place in like a small town where one girl, her mom is a very flighty, would be a good-ish word for it. She just wasn't a very good mom. She focused a lot more on herself and a lot more on what she wanted. And she meets this other girl, and this girl had just lost her mom. So this mom and this other girl start bonding because she misses this like motherly pair. And it's like sapphic, and it talks a lot about what it's like to be neglected by a parent, parental death, and grief. If you couldn't tell, I love grief. Like, yeah, I highly recommend this book. I've heard nothing but amazing things about Ashley Herring Blake, so picking up my first one, obviously I had really high expectations, and this did everything for me and more. It was so good. It was just such a good story, and I really highly recommend it to everybody. Next, I want to talk about Still Alice by Lisa Genova. This is a book that I read for my chronic illness reading vlog that I will link in the description. But this is a book about a professor at a university who has Alzheimer's. She's diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and it is the progression of the disease told through her point of view, and we see how her husband reacts and how her children also react to this news. And this is a very powerful story. I really loved this book. It was so good. I wasn't expecting to go into this being super obsessed with it. I was kind of expecting just to go into it and read it and just be done with it. But I loved this. I loved this book so much. I had to get a physical copy because I did originally have it from my library, but I had to get a physical copy. It was so good. I loved everything about the story, and just the way that they portrayed Alzheimer's was... My grandfather passed away of Alzheimer's, I think. I'm pretty sure. On my dad's side. I didn't really know him that well, but kind of having this story was like a way for me to get to know that part of the family and that side that I didn't really know at the time, and kind of understand what was happening. So it just really was an incredible book. I highly recommend this or the movie. I haven't seen the movie, but I've heard amazing things about that too. So if you're not really feeling the heaviness of the book, maybe the movie would be a good chance. But yeah, this is really cool, and the author has a PhD in neuroscience from Harvard, so she definitely knew what she was talking about when it came to this book, so loved it. Next, I want to talk about 5 Feet Apart by Rachel Lippincott. This is about 2 teenagers with cystic fibrosis. It is cystic fibrosis, right? I'm like 99% certain it's cystic fibrosis, but these 2 teenagers both suffer from it, and when you have it, your immune system is compromised, so you can't really go near another person who has it, because that's just like double the stress and anxiety and bad immune systems. So this is about 2 people who have it, and they end up falling in love because obviously, but they had to spend the time apart. Like, they had to be a certain distance from each other, and it was so cute, and it was heartbreaking. And some of the scenes, like, I still think about some of the scenes, like the skating scene. If you know, you know. I love this. Loved it so much. It was such a good story. I went into it with mixed hope. I hoped it was going to be good, but I was truly blown away by everything that this did for me. So I loved this so much, and I would read this with my entire life, and I'll read it again someday probably because it was so good. Next, I want to talk about With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. This book is so good. It's about a young single mother who is obsessed with culinary and loves cooking, and she gets this opportunity to go on this culinary trip to another country, and it's so cute. It's so good. It talks a lot about what it's like to be a single mother. It deals with differences in what that means for somebody as a person of color versus as a white person. And it's just stunning. Like, it was a stunning, stunning novel. I loved it so much. And this cover is everything I've ever wanted in my life. It's beautiful. The naked book is just as beautiful. My ring light doesn't think so, but I truly adored this book, and I think everybody should read it. I know Elizabeth Acevedo is known for her verse books, and I think having gone into this without reading those gave me a little bit of an edge, I guess you could say, because I didn't have the expectation of her verse novels going into this. So I thought this was stunning, and I cannot wait to pick more up from her. Next, I want to talk about My Whole Truth by Misha something. This is about a young girl who gets arrested for a crime she didn't commit, and I just loved this book. It was so good, and it talked a lot about the power of friendship and people sticking by your side during the really difficult times, and I adored this book. It had almost like a found family element to it, not like heavily found family, but it kind of dipped its toes in that water, and I loved it. I just thought it was really good, and it's a very underrated, underhyped book. I highly recommend it for people who are kind of interested in like a mystery but like contemporary story. I just really loved it, and I think more people should talk about it because it's really good. Finally, I have the last book before I hit my top 10 list, and that is Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. This book was incredible. When you go into the story, you kind of have an idea of what's happening, and then you kind of hit like the halfway point, and you really start to have an idea of what could be happening and why Monday isn't around anymore and why people are seeming to like look the other way. And when you get to the end, you're left feeling breathless and in tears, and it was so powerful. The way it was written was so incredibly powerful. I have nothing bad to say about this book. It was horrifying, and I love this. I'd recommend this to anybody, but look into the trigger warnings first, because holy crap, this does not shy away from a certain topic. Are we ready to dive into my top 10 of the year? I think we are. Let's go. Let's do this. Number 10 is Far from the Tree by Robin Benway. This is a young adult contemporary about adoption and how these three biological siblings end up finding each other after several years apart and several situations later. I love this book. It was very powerful. It left me in tears. It was beautiful, and I don't think enough people know about this book and discuss this book enough because it is really powerful, and it's found family, but like a real family. And it's just like, oh, it's beautiful. It's a really top tier story, and I don't know how to talk about this enough without like freaking out, but just go into this with like, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. This book was everything, and it was so important, and it was so beautiful, and I genuinely loved it. I really hope, like really hope that you all will pick it up and love it too. Number 9, we have The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. This book was amazing. It was about these two people, Ethan and Olive, who end up going on their respective sister and brother's honeymoon for them because everybody at the wedding party except those two end up getting food poisoning from shellfish, which one of them's allergic and one of them's a germaphobe, so he wasn't going to eat from the buffet.
Oh, this is so good.
Fake dating, enemies to lovers. I guess it's more like it's not even rivals. They just like didn't like each other. They weren't enemies. Like they weren't like trying to kill each other, but it was so good. The like steamy moments, so good. And like just those little like funny it's so good. Oh my god, it was so good. I had such a good time reading this book. I know that there are people out there that hated this book, that think it's really dumb and stupid, and I understand where you're coming from in some parts. Like, this is definitely a very cheesy story. Like, the cheese is real. However, I loved it. I loved it so much. So read this. It was so good. Okay, number 8 is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This book is about a woman who killed her husband, and she is put into an asylum, I believe it is, and this person is a like the narrator of the story is a psychiatrist, I think. Psychiatrist, psychotherapist, something like that, that is fascinated by her case and really wants to see if he can break her out of her shell because she hasn't spoken since she killed her husband. So good. It was so good. It was so tense. And I was just like, the entire time, I was literally like freaking out internally and externally. I was so in love with this book. And every minute I thought I knew what was happening. I didn't know what was happening. And if you guessed the plot twist, no, you didn't, because how could you? It was so good. So out of left field. And I loved it. It was so good. And I just, oh, it was so good. I don't even know how to like talk about it like a normal human being. Okay, number 7 is Where She Fell by Caitlin Ward. Oh my god, this was good. So this is about a young girl who fell in a sinkhole, and in the sinkhole she ended up finding this colony of people who had also fallen into sinkholes in like that kind of like area of the United States, and they have a colony, and in this colony they are like killing these giant like bugs and surviving and thriving, and it's just so good.
Oh my god.
So good. Like, you can't put it down good. And it's very short, so like read it because it's short and you easily can. But oh my god, it was so good. I don't even know I don't know what else to say. It was just so good. Some of the like, I don't know what I needed when I read this book. I don't even know what I classify this book as. It was everything to me, and I love it. I love it so much. It was so good, and it was so unique. I've never read anything like this, and I loved this book so much. And I got my mom to read it, my mom got my aunt to read it, everybody loved it, and I felt so vindicated in my love because everyone else loved it too. I'm such a nerd. I love this book. I really want more people to read it. Again, a very low-key, very unpopular book, so please pick it up because I need somebody to squeal about this with. Number 6 is When We Collided by Emery Lord. This is about a young girl who has bipolar disorder and a young boy that she meets in the summer, and it's about their relationship, and not just like lovey-dovey relationship, but it's also just about their like dynamic as a friendship and as a relationship. And she's like helped him in so many ways, and he's helped her in so many ways. There are a lot of really important discussions, a lot of really fun little scenes, and it was so heartwarming and so impactful, but it was also like incredibly realistic to bipolar disorder. I don't have it. Like, I don't know what it's like to live with bipolar disorder, but from what I've learned about it in the past and how I do know a couple of people with it, and this book was super important and super accurate to that. I love this book so much, and just thinking about it gives me so much joy, but also so much heartbreak because it's such a beautiful book. I want more people to read it. If you had to pick like one of the Emery Lord books, I'd probably pick When We Collided, just because it is such a whirlwind and beautiful experience, and I think anybody would have just the best time reading it. So I do think that would be what I would say to people. So loved that. Love that so much. Now we're my top 5. We're in the top 5. Number 5 is the entire series, but I'm only picking up one because I don't want to pick up the whole series. So it's a trilogy by my girl Laura Sebastian. It's the Ash Princess trilogy. Holy shit. This got me back into fantasy. Like, this made me want to read more kingdom fantasy. This is about a young girl named Theodosia, my bad, who was 6 years old when she watched her kingdom get taken by these other people, and where she watched her parents die. And the new king person is using her powers, because of course it's a fantasy, she has powers, to like help him. And it's about her kind of like taking back that role that she's supposed to have as the queen. And it's just so good. It's so freaking good. I would literally read this over and over and over and over again. It was so good. Oh my god. And the covers are stunning. So stunning. But I can't get over how amazing this book series was. Like, as a whole, one of the most well-rounded and well-written series I've ever read in my entire life. It was so good, and I'm so glad I read it this year, so I could like just fangirl about it, because that's all I want to do for the rest of my life, is just talk about Ash Princess. Oh, it was so good. It was so good. Next, my number 4 favorite book of 2021 is Like a Love Story by Abdi Nazemian. This is about a young boy who moves to New York City and ends up dating this girl, but he's actually closeted, so he doesn't really love this girl. He actually is in love with her best friend. But because of the stigma against gay men, especially in the 80s in New York, especially with the AIDS epidemic, it was something that he chose to keep private. Oh my god, this book, it killed me. Like, it literally, like, it hit me in all of the feels. It hit me in all of the ways. I read this book, gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. My friends, I think, gave it like 4s and 3s and stuff, which I understand, but I absolutely adored this book. I felt like every single character, minus Art, Art was the gay best friend, and he was just a mess. Like, he was a mess as a person. But everybody else was beautiful and amazing and stunning. And what this story stood for and what this story talked about was truly incredible. The author is an Iranian gay male, and just hearing from his perspective of what that is, like, it was incredible. It was so good. And if you can handle, you know, trigger warnings for AIDS and death and all of this stuff, I really do recommend picking it up because it's such an important story. There's really not enough literature surrounding, you know, AIDS and HIV and all of these things. And it's still a very real problem. Not as much of a problem as it was back when, you know, these were children, but it's still a very big deal. So please pick it up and read it if you want to have a heartbreaking but beautiful time. Please do, because that is very important to me. Okay, we're getting into the top 3. Drum roll, please. Number 3 is Lovely War by Julie Berry. I intend on reading this again. It is so good. It's about 2 couples that come together in the midst of World War I, and it's told from the perspective of Aphrodite, the goddess of love. What the fuck? It was so good. It was so good. I went into this book expecting little. Like, I was expecting a lot, but realistically speaking, did I think it was gonna like hit all those boxes? No, not really, because at the end of the day, it was historical fiction and it's in World War I, which is not one of my favorite time periods. World War II is one of my favorite time periods. So I had really mixed hopes for this, but holy shit, this did everything for me. It was so good. The writing was beautiful. The characterizations were stunning. And the way that this book just portrayed love in such a pure and unending way. And yes, there were some moments where it was like really insta-lovey, but when you're that age, when you're like 17 going into war and you don't really know anything yet, a lot of the times people at the age of 16, 17 were, you know, getting ready to get married. So it made sense that these people were so young and they rushed into their relationships, and it was such a pure love that these people shared for each other. And I wouldn't change a thing about this book. I love this book so much. I recommend this to anybody who's even remotely interested in World War I with a little bit of a Greek mythology aspect. I've heard some of my friends on here give it like not great reviews, but don't listen to them because they're wrong. And it was amazing. It was honestly, it was one of the most amazing books I've ever read in my entire life. It was so good. It was really good. So number 2. Oh my god, we're at number 2. Okay. I feel like this is going to be a shock for some people. So let's talk about it. So my number 2 book, so not my number 1, my number 2 book of 2021 is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. Okay, so for the entire year, I've been talking about how much this book is going to be my favorite book of 2021. Hands down, nothing can beat it kind of book. It is a book set in World War II following 2 sisters and both of their different efforts in helping aid the opposition in World War II. And it's in Nazi-occupied Paris that this is discussed. And I love this book so much. It was so beautiful. The way that this book was, it was stunning. It was so beautiful. I cried for a very long time at the end of this book. It just broke me and put me back together and then just threw me across the room again. Once again, I was the Nightingale's bitch. It was so incredible. And for people who are, you know, kind of on the fence about picking this up because it is a historical fiction adult, I will say that although it's very chunky, this does not read like a very chunky adult historical fiction. It goes by so quick. There is a lot of action. There's a lot of really important political discussions, and I wouldn't trade this book for anything. I would read this again and again and again for the rest of my entire life if I could. I adored this book. And for so much of the year, I thought this book was not going to be beat. I thought this was going to be like top tier favorite book of all time. But lo and behold, something did beat it. But I can't talk about this book enough. Like, I can't discuss. I want to get this tattooed. I'm planning on getting this little thing tattooed because it just means so much to me. This book was so important to me and I could not have asked for anything better. So there's that. So my favorite book from 2021, one of my favorite books of all time. It is up there with The Nowhere Girls. It is something that took me completely by surprise. I bought it literally not knowing anything about it. I bought it for the cover. What I got was a masterpiece of fantasy and I just can't talk about it enough. It was incredible. And that is A Dark and Starless Forest by Sarah Hollowell. This book It's about a young girl and her 7 sisters, and all of these girls possess a magical power. And at this time in the world, the world is scared of magical powers. So all of their parents take them to this person who has a cabin in the woods who is willing to hide them out and train them because he's not afraid of the power that they hold. So these girls all live there together. They are kept under a very strict watch, and they are learning to harness their power and to use it to help them in life. And it's so good. And then one day, I wasn't even done, but I had to talk about it. One day, one of the sisters goes missing, and they believe that it's the forest that is surrounding the cabin because they believe it is magical and holds a lot of magical, scary beings. And then another goes missing, and then another goes missing. And then they all keep going missing. And so you have to find them, and just... wow. I was at a loss for words for this book. Let me tell you like the 3 main things that kept me going in this story. The first thing that really drew me into the story was that she was not the only plus size main character. First of all, we actually have a main character. She has a double chin. I was so excited when I saw that. That's why I bought the book. But she's not the only one. I think there are 3 potentially other sisters who are also plus size and chubby, and they talk about it. And they have one deaf sister, so they do sign language. And they have an NB sibling, and they all talked a lot about their sexualities and how they felt there was some asexual representation, some demisexual, some pansexual, some lots of words, lots of sexualities. Oh my god, it was amazing. And the way this book ends, girl, the way this book ends has me quaking. The way this book ends had me shaking. The way that this was super gory. I loved the gore. I thought it really added to the story. And overall, this was easily the best book I read all year. When it beat The Nightingale, I almost had a stroke because I was like, what does that mean? Like, who am I? Where this beat The Nightingale, but it did. It was a fantasy, beautiful fantasy story about nature and found family. This is like a real found family. And there's gore and there's some paranormally fantasy magical elements, and I love this book so much. And this is another really unpopular book. I haven't heard anybody talk about it, so please pick this up if you haven't already. Please read this. I really want to talk about this book with somebody, and I absolutely love this book, and I want everybody else to really appreciate and love it too. So for the love of God, pick this book up. It's so incredible. It's so good. It is my favorite book of all time. Is it? I don't know. It's one of them. Definitely up there. I will say, there were some moments where there were a couple of inconsistencies that I picked up on, but I don't even remember like what they were because I'm so obsessed with the story itself and the characters and the setting and the atmosphere and everything like that. I looked past those inconsistencies and I was like, yep, that's fine. We're living our best lives. So please read this. That's all. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you for tuning into this video. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. I post whenever I can at this point. And please let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these and how you felt about them. And if you want to read any of them, please read A Dark and Starless Forest, because that is truly one of my favorite books of all time. It was incredible. So good. So please pick that up. And yeah, that's all. And until next time, bye readers.